Hi, LA Progressive friends and family. Today, Dick and I are joined by Scott and Michael Rapkin, and we're just going to have a just a conversation. It's really not an interview. We're going to be talking about the real issues that are impacting people who were affected by the Eaton Canyon fire, by the Palisades fire, and the other fires in the surrounding communities of Southern California. And before I start, I just want to set the stage and let you know why is it that Dick and I are sitting here talking to Scott and Michael. Well, after the fire, the Los Angeles area is broad, and the LA Progressive has a lot of readers. And one of a friend and a reader told me that a very close friend of mine had lost their home. And I texted that person, and that person says, I don't even know where I'm going to sleep tomorrow night. And this gentleman, I don't really know how old he is. I know he's older than I am. I'm going to say he might be 80. And he'd lived in the region for many years. So I asked if he had legal representation, and I introduced him to Michael Rapkin. And Michael and his son, Scott Rapkin, are the owners of Rapkin and Associates. And the reason I wanted him to talk to Michael, because I knew that Michael had experience dealing with this kind of situation. I've known Michael, I don't know, who knows? It's more than a dozen years, but I know him to be one of the most ethical, forthright attorneys that I've known. He has represented me. I've been his client, but I've also called him to ask him questions where he has freely shared legal information. So, Dick, do you want to say anything before I begin to ask Michael and Scott some questions?
Yeah, well, this is exciting times. We recently been in touch. We've been in touch with the person she mentioned, but others too, in our very close region, especially the historic Black community in Altadena, which is utterly destroyed, and people are at wit's end of what to do. Uh, I mean, yes, they may get some help immediately, but what do they do over the long term? And I'm looking forward to the conversation with Michael and Scott about that.
So before we press the record button, Michael was going on and on about how he wanted to give advice about insurance and, what to do if you're insured. Michael, tell us what you were saying before we press the record button about insurance.
I was telling you guys that people, not just from the Eaton Fire, but from other fire areas, including the Palisades Fire, uh, have been reaching out to me because I've told friends, and those friends told their friends and family members that I am available as a resource for them to call me because I have a lot of experience dealing with insurance policies and coverages. So even if they don't have a lawsuit, at no charge, just I'm assisting them and explaining to them what their coverages are, how to proceed with their insurance claim, uh, FEMA benefits, et cetera, et cetera. So they know where to start, how to proceed, and when they might need a lawyer.
Scott, can you tell us a little bit about Rapkin and Associates? Why is Rapkin, and tell me if I'm saying it right, uniquely positioned to support people in Southern California who have been harmed by this terrible tragedy?
Well, thanks, Dick and Sharon, for having us today. So, my father and I, we've been working together for incredibly about 15 years now. And we have a very limited number of clients that we take on because we decide when we started that we are going to be dedicated and have the kind of practice where we're available and we are going to give the attention to our clients. And so we have gotten involved in a number of what I'll call significant cases, whether they be civil rights class action cases or mass tort cases, including the Porter Ranch gas leak case, which we got involved in because that's where I grew up. I was born and raised. And so when that happened in 2015, we had countless friends and neighbors that personally knew us that had asked us to assist them. And we got involved and ultimately ended representing about 500 people in that community where I grew up. And that was personal to us. And every single one of those people had our cell phone number and they could call us anytime. And we wanted to make sure that they got personal attention. We have been involved in cases where we represent people who were affected by the Woolsey fire in Malibu in 2018. Similar representation, limited number of people that we take on because we want to know you and we want to be able to be available to you when you need it. We have been involved in with the most prominent civil rights class action attorneys in your area, for example, Barry Litt, suing the county of Los Angeles over the conditions in the juvenile halls that we've been reading about over the last couple of years. So we represent our class action. We represent 9,000 young people who have just lived through horrific conditions. We're suing 10 counties right now across the state over the costs of the telephone calls and the commissary products from the jails that families have had to pay for. And it's been a total ripoff. And so we're trying to be the first successful lawsuit in the country to challenge these kind of things. And so we're not afraid to take on and assist with challenging big corporations, utility companies, the government, whatever's necessary to seek justice. And so coming back, when we started our firm, we wanted to be about justice and representing the underdog against the government and big corporations. And that's what we do. We combine that with the personal attention. And I think that's what makes us particularly unique.
Absolutely. And I do know for a fact everything that I've known about Michael and how he operates in the community, particularly the community that is neglected, that is marginalized. I know that you've done a significant amount of work and dedicated your own time to the unhoused community in Los Angeles. I mean, there are some other cases that I don't even want to bring up unless you bring them up because I don't know if I can. So, but I will say that I personally have benefited from your legal services, your legal expertise. And even though Scott says you've worked together for 15 years, Michael, I don't want to mention your age, but you actually have been practicing law for a significantly longer period of time than 15 years. You want to talk a little bit about how long you've been doing this?
Certainly, if you take Scott's 15 years we've been together, you multiply that by 3 and you add 4, that comes to 49. That's me. 1975, I was sworn in, and the same day that I was sworn in, I opened up my own law office. I had no clients, but I had a little office. I got attorney overflow, keep me abreast until I could build up my own practice. And I always remember, by the way, that I had one item of personal property in my little office. It was a Norman Rockwell poster, the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That was 49 years ago. And today in the office where I'm sitting right now, I have a newer version of the same poster, and I hope to live by that, the golden rule. So I've been at it for 49 years, and a lot of that has been as a real estate law lawyer. So in dealing with the Eaton Fire, in addition to our experience dealing with these type of catastrophic civil litigation cases, including the Northridge earthquake, which began in 1994. We represented many homeowners associations and individuals and received over $100 million in settlements because the insurance company, Farmers, misrepresented and underestimated damages to people so they wouldn't have to pay out money. So we need to alert Eaton homeowners, especially, and others, of what they could be up against with the insurance industry. But yes, I've been doing it for a long time, and I loved it. I loved it, and still do. But I don't work full time anymore. Scott, we have Scott working his behind off, and I work every day, but part time. Except now at this fire, I'm finding myself working, and shall be working as many hours as it takes to accommodate every one of our potential clients. Yeah.
So specifically about the situation going on right now, I also understand that you've had specific experience working with the victims of wildfires or large scale fires. Is that true?
Well, the wolves.
Yeah, we've dealt with the Woolsey fire, and cases like that. It's the same way to handle a case with these major catastrophic cases. You have a major defendant, you file your lawsuit, all these cases get coordinated together. You have to deal one-on-one with your client. You have to figure out with an interview form and then one-on-one discussions what their damages are. So whether it's a gas leak, in which 36,000 people were affected, we had several hundred of them ourselves, or whether it's the Woolsey fire, or whether it's the I'm missing one of the cases. We got Porter Ranch, we got the Northridge earthquake, Woolsey fire, other cases that Scott mentioned. That's how you handle it. Gas leak, fire, all the same.
So many people won't remember what the Porter Ranch issue was. So beyond the legal aspect of it, can you just briefly describe what happened in Porter Ranch and why was there a need?
So
about a mile. Go ahead, Scott.
So you had a utility company there involved, SoCal Gas. And SoCal Gas had a major facility up in Porter Ranch that I grew up there for 18 years. I did not even know existed. And many people didn't even know existed. So it was at the top of the hill, and it's where they stored much of the gas that's used in the city. And they, because of extreme negligence over the years, one of the gas wells basically had an explosion, and for months, the gas was spewing into the air, and it was similar to a few years before the BP oil spill, which was under the water. This was out above land and going into the sky. And so there's mandatory SoCal Gas fought like crazy, like everything. So there need to be court orders forcing SoCal Gas to pay for people to relocate. So they had to pay for 9,000 people to relocate miles away so they weren't breathing in the gas 24 hours a day. And people were relocated for months. They fought that, but the court said the evidence is clear that people can't live with this stuff. And so there were immediate evacuation orders that SoCal Gas had to pay for. And then ultimately, they litigated very hard, but ultimately there was a settlement, and 36,000 people participated in that settlement, where they received compensation. Primarily, many of these people, because the elements that are in the gas caused thousands of people to have nosebleeds, headaches, severe respiratory problems, rashes on their bodies. And so they're compensated for that. House cleaning, we could talk about that today too. What happens when here it's the smoke and the soot and the ash there. It was the gas chemicals that come into the house, how important it is to get that cleaned out by a professional. It gets stuck in the furniture, your clothes, the carpets, the drapes. And then of course there's think about the as people are experiencing right now, the emotional distress and annoyance and inconvenience and how scared you are having to deal with this, especially when, as right now, so-called Edison is trying to, say they're not responsible. I think it's kind of becoming more clear every day that they are. But when you have a party that creates this kind of catastrophic event and then they're not taking responsibility for it, that causes obviously a lot of stress because you're worried about, is there going to be somebody who's going to pay for this and put me back in the position I was before this happened? And so those are all the things that took place. And ultimately there was a settlement process where people were able to obtain compensation. But that took 6 or 7 years. Now, the one thing with the fire case that's different is that you do, as long as you can show that the fire started from the equipment owned by SoCal Edison, you do not need to show negligence on the part of SoCal Edison. The fact that it happened, which is called strict liability, is enough to proceed in a fire case, which if the evidence, so in Lahaina, for example, in Hawaii, a couple of years ago, there was that terrible fire that wiped Lahaina off the map. That case settled within a year because the evidence was clear that it was the electric utility that started that fire.
Wow.
And they didn't need to litigate for years about whether they maintained it properly, whether they knew there were problems, like we did in the SoCal gas case. And so that's one of the positives in a fire case, that if the evidence is clear, once it's established, there usually can be a resolution sooner.
So, many
We call
people.
that,
Oh, I'm sorry,
we
Michael.
call that, yeah, I just want to say, so we call that claim an inverse condemnation, which is different and better than having to prove a negligence theory. It's like strict liability. The other thing I just want to quickly add to what Scott said was, in the Porter Ranch gas leak case, we had people that had to deal with the gas, which contained methane gas and other dangerous chemicals. And some of them suffered for months, because this thing went on unabated for 4 months. Not everybody could or did relocate. In the Eaton Fire or the Pasadena Fire, people are suffered from some smoke inhalation, but they had to and necessarily did get the hell out of the area very quickly. So that would not be a long sustaining issue.
Great. Now, there are people who think, well, I've got the greatest of insurance. I'm not really concerned very much about needing to talk to an attorney. I'm just going to take my issues to my insurance company, and I feel confident that the insurance company will make me whole. What would you say to someone who believes that to be true?
I'll take that on. Scott can add to it. The fact is that insurance coverage absolutely will not make you whole. Insurance coverage, the policies have coverage limits, and those coverage limits may not be nearly sufficient to allow you to replace the home that you had. The insurance has deductibles in most policies, not all policies, for your property loss, for your personal content that you lose, and that means that you're not going to get full coverage. Insurance will not cover you for the stuff that Scott mentioned in regard to the emotional distress, the annoyance, the discomfort. And I want to say in particular that, especially within the Black community of Altadena, they're entitled in a lawsuit, but not with insurance, to the loss of use and enjoyment. And we're talking now about generational wealth. And how do you compensate someone, a grandfather who got a house in the 50s or the 60s, and then they give it to their son, and then their son gives it to the grandson of the grandfather? They've lost that. They've lost the community that they've had. That little restaurant down the street, their brother who lives 3 blocks away, that's lost. And that's something that all of the attorneys representing the Altadena victims need to get a better understanding of, to really learn it. And I'm learning it real quickly, better and better, as to what this enormity of loss means. And it ain't going to be covered by insurance. Same thing goes with some of your jewelry and fine art. If you have some valuable art and jewelry, it will not be covered unless it's been delineated in your insurance policy. So goodbye to that, potentially. So insurance is not going to make you whole.
So
Yeah.
insurance is principally about homeowners who even had their house damaged or lost it altogether. But there's also renters who didn't own their building but lost all their possession. And then there's also employees of businesses who burnt down. There was a touching story in the LA Times about a lifelong waiter whose very popular restaurant is burnt, and he doesn't know where he's going to find a job. And the renter didn't lose, they have to somehow scramble and find someplace to live in a very expensive Los Angeles. Is there any recourse for people like that?
Absolutely. The renters are, number one, entitled to compensation for all the personal property that they had inside the home, even if they didn't own the home. They should also be entitled to the loss of use and enjoyment of their home, even if they didn't own the home. They're also entitled to any emotional distress damages. Many of the same things that they went through, the fear and the stress and the annoyance and the inconvenience, they're entitled to all that. You mentioned lost income. Yeah, insurance is not going to cover that either. So if someone had to move to their families, maybe their family lives in San Diego or Northern California, to get away, and their house burned down, and so they're going to stay away for a while, and they can't do their job, can't go to their job, had to leave their job. There's a lost income claim there. If you rented your house, if you owned a house and you decided to rent your house, and you were getting rent every month as income, you're entitled to get that lost income as a result of this. Whether insurance is going to cover that is a question. And I think it's absolutely inevitable that hopefully the insurance companies will pay out, but I think it's inevitable that, like what happened in the Northridge earthquake claims, is they're going to be looking for ways to underestimate the claims. People have deductibles, so they're not going to get anything unless the claim is over a certain amount. So I think that the insurance companies are going to try and lower their estimates, to limit the amount that they have to pay out. Perhaps even in some cases, limit it so it's below the deductible and argue that they don't have to pay anything. And so I just think that with this many claims and this much damage, the insurance companies, they're looking to make money, and they're going to they're not going to play it straight. And so one of our lawyers' jobs is to find the right people, experts, to come in and say, no, this, if you want to rebuild your house, this is what it's going to cost. And by the way, think about the demand on contractors and labor and supplies with so many houses that have to be rebuilt all over the city. And the costs are going to be high because of that demand. Insurance companies are not going to take that into consideration. They're going to fight that. And so the actual realistic cost to rebuild is going to be more than insurance companies are going to be wanting to pay. That's just the reality of it.
Thank you, Scott. Your years of history has made it so that you could just rattle off lots of things that the average person isn't even thinking of. Like I'm sure that there are people right now who have been harmed by this tragedy who think, well, I don't have insurance, or I'm just a renter, or yeah, I lost a week's pay, but how is that going to be recoverable? But having Rapkin and Associates there to answer those kinds of questions, in my mind, I imagine that it's possible that there are people who think they're not entitled to any kind of have damages, but are not entitled to have them recovered, and they're completely wrong. They need to find out, which is one of the reasons that we're going to be, the LA Progressive, along with Pasadena Community Coalition, is going to have Michael and Scott Rapkin to come into the community. The Pasadena Church has become a hub of people gathering to either drop off donations or pick up donations for the people who have survived this tragedy in the Eaton Canyon area. And this Pasadena church, I was there last week, amazed at the hubbub of information sharing of resources, actually foodstuffs and baby diapers and legal information. And Michael and Scott are going to be available for that at Pasadena Church, which is located at 425 Sierra Madre Villa in Pasadena on Saturday, February the 1st from 3 to 5 p.m. And Michael, one thing that as we close, you've talked a lot about what's available to people. Can you explain what contingency, uh, seeking legal representation under a contingency fee basis?
Sure. So on a contingency fee basis, the lawyer, including us, will take on a case for a client in which the client will not pay us any money unless and until we obtain a successful settlement, or should this case ever go through a trial and we prevail at trial.
Okay.
And so the client will incur no cost in legal costs, legal fees, but they will pay a percentage of the recovery. That is what a contingency fee is. And I would expect and suspect that every attorney is doing it on a contingency fee basis. So no client needs to worry about, can I afford to pay a lawyer to seek justice? We'll do it on a contingency fee basis.
So some 10,000s of people have been badly harmed by these fires, and there's been mention of class action lawsuits. We've all heard of class action lawsuits, but how would somebody who's sleeping on their daughter's spare bedroom in Long Beach get involved with something like that?
So,
Scotty R. I called my son Scotty R. Tell him about the class action. You're the pro.
yeah, so these there might be some class actions filed here, but these what we call the mass tort cases, the gas leaks, the fires, are not really suitable for a class action because everybody's experiences are so different. And so we take these cases on one by one. Everybody has their own individual case. And so how does somebody get started? They have to find a lawyer, sign up with a lawyer, and that lawyer will then file a lawsuit on their behalf individually. They'll be named individually, them and their family will be named, and they'll have their own case, and they'll present their own damages facts, their own story. And that's why there's so many unique factors here. The case can, whether Edison started the fire is a common liability issue, but what each person's individual experiences were and what they lost and what they went through is unique to them. And so that's why these cases are individual to each person.
Gotcha.
Wow, that is so important, Scott. And that's one of the things that I'm concerned about with the people that are going through this trauma right now, is they need someone that they can talk to. They don't need to call a number and get, just an answering machine, or a person who's not even an attorney just fielding calls. And that's what I know that you and your dad offer, because you offered it to me. And I've seen your dad in action for so many years. So again, we are so happy that Michael and Scott Rapkin are on the scene. We will be seeing the LA Progressive community. We urge everyone who hears this, sees this, to please share it. Whether or not you live in the region, you may know someone who lives in the region. So share it on your social media, on Facebook, on Blue Sky. Share it widely. Thank you so much for joining us. And the LA Progressive is going to do its best to keep our community up to date with what is happening with these cases and what's happening in the healing in our surrounding communities. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Scott.
Thank
Thank you, Dick and Sharon.
Thank you for sticking around. If you like the LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below, and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.